Hi, this is Street Life and I'm Natasha with the recipe for making savory, sweet, spicy fried chicken. So it might come as a surprise, but I am not the biggest fan of fried chicken. In general, I tend not to really like things with breading or any kind of coating on it. The reason being that I thoroughly dislike wet or soggy bread, any type of like soggy elements. So even when I was a kid, before Popeyes came to New York and you really just had KFC or Kennedy Fried Chicken, it wasn't my favorite thing to eat. And quite often, if I ate it, it was like it had to be absolutely smoking, blazing straight out the oil. And even then, I would typically peel the skin off and just eat the chicken from the inside. In the years since, I've now come to at least be able to eat fried chicken with the coating on the outside, but that's with the requirement that it be crunchy, crispy, it can't be soggy or anything along those lines, and my preference is that it be spicy. Well, really it's a requirement that it's spicy, but then also preferably that there's a bit of sweetness. So in recent years, that has meant garlic chili sauce and preferably a little bit of honey, which is how this recipe came about. It's a fried chicken recipe where the chicken is obviously fried, but then I take it a step further by creating a sauce in which I dip the fried chicken, and in this case, the chicken is nice and hot, the batter is pretty crispy, and dipping it in the sauce just amps up the flavor. But this is something that I would recommend you make and you eat right away. And if you have to heat it up, I would recommend reheating it in the oven so that way the skin, crisps back up. It pretty much takes the savory flavor of fried chicken and amps it up by adding some more complexity. The combination of flavor profiles, which would be savory, sweet, spicy, you get a little bit of umami as well. And it just makes for this very nice complex flavor that hits all the right flavor notes. So here I have a whole chicken, which I've just cut into pieces. It's like typical fried chicken pieces. So drumsticks have been separated from the thighs, and because the breasts are quite large, I've split them from the wings and then also cut the breast itself in half. Breasts don't really have a lot of flavor to them, right? But just as when I make turkey, I go ahead and make the neck, make the gizzards, all that kind of stuff. So I'll be doing it here. And this is something that I could snack on while I'm cooking. Now, the meat at this point, I'm just going to season fairly basic, which is just seasoned salt, black pepper. If you want, you could put a little bit of blended seasoning, but I'm not going to add a lot of seasoning because I'm going to add some to the breading mix. The reason being, we want to season at different stages where the crust on the outside should have a lot of flavor. And then also we want to ensure that the meat on the inside isn't bland. So if you season one but not the other, you'll end up with one having flavor but not the other. So what you want to do is just take the time to season at both steps. And the reason I'm not going to go too overboard with the seasoning on the chicken itself is because I'm going to soak this in a little bit of buttermilk. Now, buttermilk has some acid in it, which helps to tenderize the meat. It's sort of, if you think of like Indian cooking, where they soak meat, or they'll marinate meat rather, in yogurt, the little bit of acid helps to break down the meat, helps to tenderize it, make it nice, flavorful, very juicy. And that's the purpose of the buttermilk here. So you don't really want to over-season the meat. Just a bit of salt, black pepper, which helps to lock in the moisture, but I don't put much else on it. The reason being that it's going to sit in the buttermilk and much of that seasoning is going to end up coming off in the buttermilk because we're not going to cook it in the buttermilk. But another benefit to soaking the chicken in the buttermilk is that the little bit of liquid will help the coating to stick to the chicken. If you've ever had fried chicken before and you bite into it and the entire crust comes off, that's because it hasn't properly adhered to the meat. But doing this little bit of moisture from the buttermilk is going to help to create, for lack of a better term, it's going to help the coating adhere to the chicken. For dredging the chicken, I use a zip top bag. The reason being that, number one, I think it's a bit neater. Number two, it helps you more evenly coat the chicken because instead of, let's say, putting your flour mixture on a plate or in a bowl, you put it inside the bag, you zip the top of the bag, it enables you to shake it around to evenly coat the chicken, which helps to ensure that you get the coating everywhere. Whereas with a bowl or plate, you flip it, you turn it and whatnot. Sometimes you'll have some spots that aren't evenly coated. In addition to that, you can sometimes end up making a bit of a mess. This here, you put the chicken into the bag, you shake it up. When you're done, you can just take the bag and pop it into the trash. Now for the flour, I am using unbleached all-purpose flour, to which I'm going to add some seasoning salt, black pepper, granulated garlic powder, paprika, granulated onion powder, and then this is optional, but a small amount of cayenne pepper. This is just to add a little bit of kick to the breading mix, but you can certainly leave it out for a milder flavor. And once I've got my seasonings added to the flour, I'll go ahead, zip the top of the bag, and shake it up to combine. As I said before, doing it this way, I find it to be a lot easier and neater as well. You can very easily well combine all of the seasonings with the flour, making sure that it's well mixed throughout. Now, you could stir the ingredients together if you had this on a plate or in a bowl, but it's up to you. From here, all that's left to do is just to take the chicken pieces and coat them in the flour mixture. Simply just take them out of the buttermilk. I would say not all at once. Take them out, one at a time. Give them a little tap to get some of the liquid off so that it's not dripping all over the place, and then pop it into the zip top bag. I would say maybe 2 or 3 pieces at a time. Try not to get the liquid on your hand all over the place. Zip the top of the bag, give it a shake to make sure that the chicken is evenly coated all over. Take it out, and I have a baking pan or a baking sheet that I'll line with foil. And as I'm breading them, I'll just go ahead and put them onto that sheet. I think it's just easier to do it this way rather than doing too many steps at once. So if you now have your oil going, you put a few pieces in, then you're going back to coat and whatnot. You're having to keep your eye on too many things, right? Keep an eye on the chicken to make sure that it's not cooking too fast, that it's at the right temperature. Then when you're trying to coat the chicken at the same time, your hands might end up getting dirty and whatnot. You forget about the chicken. I think it's just easier just to go step by step. Do the entire step all the way through for the pieces, move on to the next step, do that all the way through for all of the pieces, and then just go from there. I think it helps you avoid mess, and it also helps you avoid burning the chicken because you're not trying to balance everything. You're not trying to multitask. And so now that I've got all my pieces breaded, I'm going to fry the chicken in a stock pot, which I've just filled with a few inches of oil. Depending on the size of the stock pot, 1 to 3 inches or so would be more than enough. The reason being that you want the pot to have high sides so you don't have to worry about the oil bubbling up and bubbling out of the pot. And you don't want a pot that's too small where the chicken's going to be crowded in together. You want to be able to get at least 2 or 3 pieces of chicken into the pot without the sides of them touching. So that way it doesn't stick together, and you don't want them to steam. You want them to fry. Now, the way that I test the oil is I take just a little pinch of the flour mixture, and after allowing the oil to heat for a little bit, I take a pinch and just throw it into the oil. Just make note of how long it takes to start sizzling. The reason being that you don't want the oil to be too hot or too cold. If the oil is too hot and you put your chicken in, you'll find that the coating is going to brown before the meat inside gets a chance to properly cook. If the oil is too cold, you put your chicken in, the batter and the breading is just going to absorb all of that oil, and you're going to end up with a greasy mess. So you want it to be just the right temperature where the coating is going to brown nicely, but at the same time, the chicken's going to have enough time to cook. Now, another thing that I do is I take a baking sheet and I put a little cooling rack on it, lining the baking sheet with foil first. Just like, a cooling rack like what you might use for cookies or baked goods or whatnot. And I'll put my oven at about 200, 250 degrees. And I'll let the chicken rest on this until I'm done making all of the chicken. So instead of taking the chicken out of the oil and putting it on paper towel to drain, I go ahead and I put it on the cookie rack. The reason being that with the oven being warm, it's going to help the chicken stay warm, number one. Secondly, it's going to help to ensure that your chicken is fully cooked throughout without drying it out. And I would actually recommend that you start with frying the pieces that are going to take longer to cook. This would be like your chicken thighs, your drumsticks, the dark meat, the breasts. They won't take as long to cook, so you can cook those after. This way, using the oven method, you put these in those pieces because you're cooking them first. They're going to spend a little bit more time in the oven, and it's going to help to ensure that it's cooked to the right level of doneness and that it's also kept warm, but that it doesn't dry out. If you were to do it in reverse, you run the risk of the breast kind of drying out as a result of being in the oven longer. It's just another step that you can use to ensure that the chicken stays nice and warm and that it's also cooked to the right level of doneness. You can also just cook a piece, and when it comes out, you just, cut it open with a knife, make sure the inside is fully cooked, which would give you an idea to gauge about how long you're going to need the chicken to cook. It varies depending on the size of your flame, the pot that you're using, how hot your oil is. So it wouldn't be beneficial for me to tell you, 5 minutes, 10 minutes or something like that, because those different factors are going to affect the amount of time that the chicken cooks for, as well as the size of your pieces of chicken. And so from here, you're good to go, right? You have just regular fried chicken. You could certainly stop here. But to take it another level, I make a sauce to go with it. Sometimes I make fried chicken, and because I like to have it sweet and spicy, when I'm ready to eat it, I'll drizzle over a little bit of honey and I'll have some garlic chili sauce on the side. But here I'm actually going to make a sauce in which I'm going to dip the chicken. And really it's just a combination of some garlic chili sauce, honey, fish sauce, and hoisin, which I just put into a container. In this case, I'm using a measuring cup. And this I take and I put into the microwave just to heat up all of the elements and make them easier to blend together. Because the honey at room temperature can be a little bit thick and you won't have as easy a time trying to blend it with the rest of the stuff. So put it into the microwave. The honey kind of liquefies and makes it easier to blend. And from there, I just put the chicken in a bowl and I coat it with the sauce. If you want, you can dip the chicken into the container, but I find it to just be easier to put the chicken into a bowl, just a few pieces at once, and spoon over the sauce and just give it a good toss. And you're going to end up with some really flavorful chicken. The chicken itself is going to be nice and juicy. It's going to be crunchy on the outside, tender on the inside, lots of flavor. And then adding the sauce to it just punches up the flavor even more. If you remember, I added a little bit of cayenne to the coating, and then within the sauce you have the garlic chili sauce, which I like versus hot sauce because it gives you a reasonable amount of heat without being overwhelmingly hot. At the same time, it's not as vinegary as other sauces. It's quite mild. It has a good amount of flavor, a good amount of heat. It's a nice balanced sauce. A little bit of honey, which adds some sweetness. The hoisin combined with the seasoning salt that we added at various points makes it nice and savory. And the fish sauce just adds a little bit of that umami flavor, which it all combines for a really nice dish. You end up with a very nice complex flavor that hits various flavor profiles. Really enjoyable. This you could serve as you would regular fried chicken. So, it's good for a Sunday dinner. It's good for a nice picnic. It can be eaten hot. It can be eaten at room temperature. The only thing is that it's a little bit messier than your traditional fried chicken, but it's incredibly enjoyable, very good, lots of flavor.
Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my Cooking at Home playlist. Go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.